officials their thoughts on medical marijuana in the wake of last year's issue 2 defeat, and we know you're all working on something in that vein. Is there anything you can tell us in terms of where that issue stands and where you foresee it going?
Yeah, I'm happy to take that. I mean, look, I was the biggest opponent against this last ballot initiative that went across the state. And I took the opportunity to travel the state and talk about it a lot, but there's a true difference between the actual, and let's just take away the issue of the monopoly language we put in, because quite frankly, regardless of the marijuana initiative, that is an important step to protecting the Constitution that steps away from the marijuana initiative altogether. What the real issue is, and let me tell you, I'm not a proponent of either, definitely not a proponent of recreational marijuana use, and right now I'm not a real big proponent of marijuana, medical marijuana, and I haven't still seen full facts before me that this is something that is actually doing some good. However, that being said, I have sat with the families that say that this is very helpful for their families. I've had to sit and talk with some of these groups that say that there is some medicinal purpose to it, and I get and understand across the state there's a lot of folks that really see this as something that can be fruitful and helpful to some families. So that's why we've taken a proactive step on a bipartisan basis in the House with Leader Strahorn to really pull this task force together. Representative Ramos serves on that task force with this group, and the importance was not to have it filled with legislative members as much as different counterparts from the community that take this on, including the opposition. And let me just say this too, there's a lot of folks still looking to push ballot initiatives, and I get it, but part of the issue is we have a legislative process, we have folks listening, and we're really encouraging those folks to come forward and participate in that task force. And you know, this task force is going to end at the end of March. They're actively working. Matter of fact, they just had a meeting yesterday to participate. Senator Faber has his senators traveling the state to collect their information. I have no doubt that these two will come together to do something that really works for our state, but give the opportunity to have open minds and really hear you know, what is the right direction for the state, especially when it comes to medical marijuana. And so you know, we're open, we're listening, and I'm interested to find out how this task force continues to work and the findings that we get from that task force. And you know, task forces aren't all perfect, but they're also the opportunity to provide forums to allow a lot of people to participate in that. So we get that there's a wide swath of a lot of interest, and we ask them to participate in that. And I know Chairman Schuring is reaching out constantly along with the task force members to kind of pull people into that conversation piece.
Thank you, and welcome Senator Faber, who's arrived. Did you want to speak to that?
I would just piggyback on the speaker's comments that as we look at this task force, I think there's some things that they can get at. You know, when you talk about marijuana use, it sort of connotates certain things. There's a narrative that's been built up over the years. But when you really think about pharmaceuticals, many of the drugs that are used are derived from some type of natural plant. So the notion that marijuana would possess some medicinal purpose really isn't all that far-fetched in that sense, and there have been a lot of indications that it does, in certain circumstances, have a medicinal clinical application. And so I think the fact that people are listening, that we can sort of get past the narrative or the illicit drug narrative and sort of see it for the way we see a lot of pharmaceuticals or the derivatives of those natural plants, and say, hey, this has some legitimate properties. I think it's been demonstrated that it helps with seizures in kids with epilepsy. I myself have had contact with a person for over a decade who was it's a female who was physically abused by her significant other, and has a lot of really bad physical complications as a result of that, and the only thing that gives her relief from the pain is marijuana. And so I think what the speakers put together a task force to study these properties, and people listening will be able to figure out what's the proper way, what's the safe way to guard public safety and still get at some legitimate medical properties contained in marijuana.
Julie, can I got
Yes.
one other follow-up, because I think this is important too, because there's still a lot of naysayers saying, well, why does the legislature need to study something again? And I understand that and I get that, but what folks gotta understand is, we got a lot of new members. We got a lot of new folks that need to take the opportunity to process this on both sides of the aisle. And this is not something that we're saying, hey, we're gonna study for all of 2016. This is something where we're trying to get a clear, definitive answer so that we can actually move at a quick pace. But anybody that knows me, quite frankly, whether it's been charter school reform or any other bill, I'm happy to sit and take all the arrows in the world, but we're not going to move something until we understand that we're going to do the right things for the state of Ohio and for the people. So we're going to ensure that we're doing the right process to move forward, that we're doing the right things to regard to public safety also in conjunction with that. And I think this is an important process to take the opportunity to get a lot of folks on the same page, including those which we, by the way, just after our press conference, had one of the groups that was looking to do a ballot initiative come forward and say, hey, how can we participate and be a part of this? So I think it's important to allow that time to work so that we can put everyone to the table, to allow them the opportunity to come and work with the legislature. And anyone knows the legislative process, it's not something that works in overnight. I mean, it needs some time to get these folks to move forward, and I think this gives a great opportunity and platform to do so.
Thank you. And on the Senate side?
Sure, I'll address it shortly, very quickly. You know, if we can improve quality of life for Ohioans, and we can do it safely, then we need to do it. And I don't think we need to take a bunch of time doing a lot of studies on this issue. We've had doctors testify. They'll come into our offices and explain that they would much rather prescribe medicinal marijuana for certain patients rather than a combination of 10 or 12 opiates. And that makes sense. So if that patient can derive benefit from medicinal marijuana rather than the combination of the legal drugs that they can currently prescribe, then we need to do that in the state. And so we need to come up with something before we get another ballot initiative, because obviously people weren't in favor of that one. And so we can do it responsibly from a legislative level, and if we don't, we may end up with the same situation that we did with casinos. And so when the legislators don't act, then you get the initiative moving, and that's exactly what will happen again.
Look, to me, it's a very different issue between medical marijuana and recreational marijuana. And so we're having that discussion. But if it's for medicinal purposes, it's probably not best delivery. The best delivery vehicle for medicinal marijuana is not smoking. It's probably some other form. And so anything that we would consider passing, it probably needs to be in a format that is both medically supported by the research and also in a controlled environment, that we're not creating, the loophole that the marijuana industry wants, that you can, have a doctor shopping prescription and go in for just about anything you can think of, from a hangnail to, chronic dandruff. And from that perspective, we want to get to a circumstance that both is supported by the medical research and in a way that we can control and monitor it. One of the problems we see all across society is drug abuse. And it follows both on prescriptions and the illicit drug abuse. And so we need to make sure we're not making that problem worse, trying to get to a problem that I think most of us believe is solvable. Just use the one example. Frankly, the House had a bill that many of us supported and would consider passing tomorrow, allowing the epileptic access to marijuana. But here's the problem. What's the concentration? What's the delivery method? What's the consistency in the delivery method? Is the product, if you're not from an FDA supplier, are you really getting what you think you're getting? All of those are problems associated with medical marijuana that goes beyond the concept of, well, I want pot because it'll make me feel better. So that's the discussion that you get to by having hearings, and that you get to by developing a legislative deliberative process. I will tell you, I believe that there is support in the General Assembly to do some form of medical marijuana legislation. But we're going to see what that means. And I think that's the key for me. What does it mean?
Thank you. All right, let's go to the mic.